The Houston Defender invites you to read our stories about advancing democracy and share your opinion on our social media platforms of what you think of advancing democracy and what it should be. We vote, we elected lawmakers, lawmakers make laws, and laws impact our lives. So you see, it all starts with you. Join us, won't you, and let us know what you think about advancing democracy. Welcome to the Kitchen Table Talk. I'm Sunny Messiah Giles, publisher and CEO of the Houston Defender Network, Houston's leading Black information source, and I'll be your host for the program today. The fact of the matter is, Black women today are transforming the political landscape, and the power of Black women is evident in the number of Black women elected to office today. It's growing, and 2020 was a significant year. The fact of the matter is, when Black women flex their muscles, hey, we got a lot of results. A lot of Black women were elected across the nation, including Kamala Harris, our first woman of color, Black to me, y'all, Vice President of the United States of America. But the fact of the matter is, Black women still are underrepresented in the government, especially as it relates to growth. When you look at the fact that Black women represent 7.8% of the population, we only represent 5% of the elected offices. So it's time for folks to start listening to Black women, supporting Black women. And I don't mean just volunteering, I mean donating, investing, putting your money where your mouth is, and also voting, which is the final action. With the upcoming 2022 elections, this is a perfect opportunity. And with me, we have 4 women who have been in the vineyards, who are exceptional and understand the political landscape that exists today and where we've come from and where we're even going to. With that, they're going to share their experiences with an effort of empowering all Black women, but women in general also. With that, my guests are Martha Castex Tatum, who is the Mayor Pro Tem, Vice Mayor Pro Tem of Houston, Texas. She is on the City Council and serves as District K's representative, and she was elected in 2018. Martha, thanks for joining us today. Then there's the Honorable Tanisha Hepstead, Harris County Clerk of the 3rd largest county in the nation and the largest in the state of Texas. She's the first African American woman to serve in this role. And then there's Rona Rose Akama Makia. Hey, I think I got it right, who is an exceptional campaign manager and understands and has broad experience on the grassroots level. And then there's Tracy Scott, who's responsible for all of what we've been enjoying today and will enjoy for the rest of the afternoon, who is president of the Black Women's PAC. Tracy is a community advocate who is dedicated to empowering Black women in politics. With that, ladies, I want to welcome you to the Kitchen Table Talk. Let's get this show on the road, okay?
Yes, thanks for having us.
All righty, so the first question, let's start on a positive note of what are some of the opportunities that you see that Black women have today as it relates to the political arena?
Running for office. I think that it is representation matters, and the fact that Black women can see other Black women excelling in the political arena, that they too can know that they can also run for office. So it's exciting to see more Black women put in their name on the ballots, and other Black women supporting Black women who are on the ballot. So just know that you too can run for office and be successful.
I'd say there's an example of Black women doing things in every facet of our community. You know, we are school board members, we are PTA leaders, we are church leaders. We are leading in every area, whether it's behind the scenes or in front of the scenes. And I think for most of us, now we have the opportunity to be brave enough to say, I no longer have to be behind the scenes and working to promote this person. I know the job. I can do it myself as well. So I'd like to agree with my sister here. But the bottom line is we have an example of being brave enough to do it and step into the role yourself.
Yeah, I think it's exceptional. The leadership capacity of Black women is unmatched, in my opinion. I think we have historically been able to lead into places where other people couldn't find the strength to even look into the room. And so I think now is the time for us to say, we're here. It's our room, and it's our time to do this.
Lisa, Tracy.
I have to agree with each of you. I think that this is also an opportunity for us to step back and look at the landscape and realize how involved we are and how many spaces we fill and how many issues affect our life. And I don't think that there's an issue that is decided upon that doesn't affect the life of a Black woman. The opportunities that we have in corporate America and in professional business have allowed us the space to learn a lot and be a part of a lot as head of household, as single parents, as wives, as, you know, just a member of the community. We do a lot, and we are in a lot of small spaces that equal to one big, you know, presence. So I think this is a really big opportunity for us to recognize our power.
You know, as you talk about women being professional or women who are just working, period, folks say, you know, I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. Then, you know, I got my kids, I got my career, I got to take care of home. How important is this? What is the direct connection between the way we live and the life we have and the politics that each one of you are serving in?
The direct connection is community. We just talked about how we're mothers, we're sisters, we're all these different roles. And one thing Black women care about is the community. We care about the schools that our children go to and what kind of experience they have, and that there's equity when they go to the classroom, that there are the right type of teachers and people in those spaces. And so community is it. There is not one space in community that I don't see Black women activating in. From as small as the homeowners associations to MUDs. I mean, spaces that you were like, oh, you know, because we care about our livelihood. And so the direct connection is community. It's something about us. It's in our fabric from very beginning times before we had the opportunity to be where we're at now. We were behind the scenes figuring out how did we make it work for our community.
It's even the one, you know, the one house on the street that has the popsicles,
Right.
you know, or the one house on the street that everybody can play in their yard, you know,
Or
and
get a
that's,
sandwich.
and get a sandwich, yeah. And, you know, we're there, that's us, that's, you know, the mom in the house is doing that. So,
And traditionally, Black women have been nurturers from all facets of our lives. And for us to be able to nurture a safe space for us to support each other, to support our families, to support our workplaces, to support our communities, support our schools, we are great decision makers. And serving in elected office is about making decisions on behalf of others. And when you put a nurturer, a decision maker, a person who is destined for leading, you've got a great combination for representing other people.
You know, when you start talking about some of the issues in Texas particularly that have impacted women, whether it is your body and you having control over making decisions of what you can and cannot do, or whether it's the history books that your children can read to reflect Black history. Bring down to me how the correlation between you vote, you elect a person, this person elected creates policies, and those policies impact your life. Draw that correlation as it relates to some of your experiences and some of the things that you've had to encounter in both making the policies, but also having to combat those policies in galvanizing the community against those movements that are not particularly in the interests of Black women.
Quite frankly, elections have consequences, and we have to be very vigilant about making sure we vote in every election, from local politics all the way to the presidential election. And I know for so many people, they see the presidential election as the mecca of voting. I voted in the presidential election, I did my civic duty. But we really need to make sure people understand that local elections play a big part in their everyday quality of life. And we need to encourage them to vote in every single election. And not only go out to vote, but get to know who you're voting for. Because every person that looks like you may not be for you, and every person that does not look like you may not be against you. It is our civic responsibility to get to know the candidates, what they stand for, and to vote in every single election.
That deserves an amen.
Exactly,
I think we saw evidence of that even with, you know, COVID-19 and money coming to states, and who got to decide where that money went, who got to decide, you know, if the health of your kids or the health of your family members was affected by the rules. And that to me really showed how important local elections are. And I think we're becoming a little more educated on that. I think we're starting to see people going, those school board elections might need a second look, right? Or, somebody should talk about some of these other boards, because at the local level, that's what's impacting you, right? Of course, presidential, like you said, you want someone at the leadership level who has your interest at heart, but these local elections, that's where a lot of decisions get made.
And I agree, and even with COVID, you started looking at where were the vaccination sites.
Right.
How many were in our community, how many, that's a decision that is made by the local elected officials.
Exactly.
And when you vote for president, you're voting high, it's just so high. But that money trickles down, that leadership trickles down, and your everyday life is governed by the people that are right in your community. And those dollars have to be allocated where they benefit us, and you have to be a participant of that. And back to living, everybody's so tired, we have to be careful how tired we live. I'm so busy is really I'm overwhelmed.
Right.
I'm so busy is that I'm tired. And we have to be conscious of how busy we live because it makes us tired. And then when you're not as busy, start getting involved. Start looking at what's happening around you and start paying attention.
Make that investment.
And I think a really key aspect of that is when we had to slow down because of COVID, we saw a lot of people rise up and say, I'm paying attention now because I'm not so busy.
Correct.
And I have to slow down, and I realized that there are some real issues that I need to be involved in. I mean, we saw it with the George Floyd protests. I mean, people were paying attention because they were at home, they were watching the news, they were reading the newspaper, they were looking at what's happening in their community and decided, I can make a difference. My voice needs to be heard for change.
And unfortunate, but how timely.
Yes.
For the better part of my career, I spent educating people on the actual voting process. And you talked about connectivity between knowing who the heck to vote for, where to go vote, right? And if we just talk about all the barriers that have been placed in communities of color to discourage you, purposefully advertisements, you're in the communications field, all of the things done to create those barriers. Well, now what I think is happening, just like we gave an example of, we're watching, we have social media, we have all these platforms where you can't really hide what's going on. And you have to realize that we all have some sort of platform. There's no platform too large, there's no platform too small. So when we think about, okay, there's an election coming up and it's a community election and we really need to activate this particular area, okay, well, where are the folks at? How are we gonna meet them and have a one-on-one on voter education? People get overwhelmed. The normal voter has no idea who a county clerk is, right? And when I go out, I always have to say, my role is so important to your everyday life. But it starts, we always talk about that, it starts with education and creating a platform. Again, Black folks are at church. Black folks are outside at the basketball place. We can't go be afraid to go where our people are. We have to meet them at the point of their needs. They are not going to come to us and get educated.
And I say this all the time, democracy is learned. We can never grow tired of teaching democracy. We have to be vigilant and very intentional about making sure our children and our children's children know about the sacrifices that were made for the vote. Because I personally believe when I look at pictures of people who went through water hoses and dogs at the polls, that gives me a great resolve to go to the polls and cast my vote. I want to make sure that those actions were not in vain.
Truly. Let's shift a little bit to the challenges that Black women face in the political arena. And there are no small feats for those of you who are elected officials at this table. Can I hear amen? Let's talk about some of those hurdles. What are some of the big buckets that Black women have to deal with when it comes to running for office or seeking to serve in a political position?
I will tell you one of the biggest challenges is statistically, black women raise less money than other candidates. And it is important for us to get this message out to our community and to our supporters that campaigns cost money. You have to be able to get your name and your message out to people that will vote for you. And the way that you can really do that, unfortunately, it takes a lot of money. And people have to be able to support you by not only block walking for you, sharing your message, but we have to be able to put our funds and invest in the candidates that we want to see representing us. Right. And that takes money. And we have to be better stewards of our finances so we can get the best candidates at the tables representing us.
Yeah, and I think it's also, there's something to be said about the data of the black community within politics. Part of what I do is really look into how have we been counted. We could go from the census, but also just into our voting behavior. And I think a lot of it is misleading because the black community is historically transient, right? A lot of moving around. Polling locations get shut down every other election, so you can't really trace against some of the traditional methods you would, right? How many times has this community voted at this polling location? How many people from this household have voted? And so I think if you come in and you're looking at the data, a lot of people will tell you, oh, you can't run this race because the data's not there. That's not true. Sometimes you need to ask another person, what are their data sources? Because there might just be a population that is tired because they're unheard. And so leaning into finding staff members, finding team members who will actually challenge that method and lean into what is the actual data for my community, I think we see a lot more people feel more comfortable stepping up.
And that brings up the grassroots perspective of it, because like you said, we have so many discriminatory things that exist that we have no idea really exist, but are hampering us in some cases or blocking us from taking certain steps because we think the numbers say this, but in reality it's really that.
And the way black women are portrayed in the media. I mean, no one polices clothing for men. They police women's clothing, specifically black women's clothing. No one polices their body types when they are men serving in elected offices. But who is more policed than a black woman? And who is more villainized than black women in elected office? I mean, look at the conversation happening now with the vice president. I mean, the statistics are showing that her approval rating is at 28%. The circles I run in, her approval rating is way higher than 28%, but the media is reporting a low approval rating because then you start having people repeat those statistics, and then it grows exponentially in a negative fashion. I mean, she just came from France, had a successful event there. Why aren't we talking about the success of that trip?
Like perception in the absence of reality becomes reality.
And we're back to Rona with the data. Who did you ask?
Who did you
Who
ask?
are you asking?
Exactly.
Are you asking people that actually know what the vice president does?
Exactly.
You know, so if you're looking for a social media presence, or if you're looking for her to, stand at the podium beside the president all the time, well,
That's
then
not what they do.
That's not what she does. That's not what that role is for. So we're back to data.
Well, who gets
did
credit?
Who
Who gets credit? I mean, Build Back Better right now is getting a lot of hype, a lot of PR, and a lot of comms. It's not being tied to her. For some reason, we're completely separating it that somehow only the president was able to get this passed. If there's not 400, it's something other people that had to also be convinced to let this get passed. And that one person can realistically do that. Or as if her influence and her recognition within the communities they're actively choosing to not talk about didn't have an impact on the infrastructure bill that a lot of our southern states have been begging for years. And so I think there's some key messaging that's intentionally being villainized against her, honestly, to persuade what they think will be coming up. And I think it's intentional.
Intentional. I agree.
If you had to identify the elephant in the room when it comes to black women, what would that elephant be? Is it the money part, or is it what is it?
Money is just one of the elephants in the room. I think one of it is a safe place hub, right? I didn't know about Black Women's PAC, and I feel like I've been in Houston and activated almost in every single space in the city of Houston, and I was like, doggone it, how did I not know about them when I was making my run for this? But where is the place for black women to go to in Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, so that you have these experience of women who are able to say, okay, you want to run, well, sister, you're not there yet, but we want to help you get there. And so that is such a great challenge. I hear people all the time to say, where do I start? And let's be honest, the even bigger elephant is the institution of politics. Who are the institutional, exceptional black folks in the room where you can't be exceptional enough to be in the room with them? And so the challenge that we go through with black folks, let's start knocking out. You know, with black people is, as a young black woman, yes, I'm confident, but if I'm going to someone who's been in the industry for a long time, how am I going to be received when I get there? So there has to be a hub, and I think Tracy's on to something, because there should be black women PACs in every major city and every major region and county throughout our U.S. where we know where to go to get the fundamentals. So when we go to the table and we're ready to run, we are ready for prime time.
So it's not just about the money, it's also about the training and the grooming of those candidates.
Absolutely.
Because you will be criticized, your speech, your look, everything you do will be watched and criticized. And so we, as a Black Women's PAC, need to make sure that the black women that we put forward as our candidates are prepared and ready for prime time.
That's right, for prime time. And I've been in situations, I should have and have been prepared to run for a very long time. But and I've gone through this campaign school and that campaign school, and you know, we do all these things to be prepared. But the truth of the matter is, I was prepared probably 5 campaign schools ago, but I didn't have the support that I needed to achieve that goal. In the county clerk's office, I started as an admin assistant in public affairs. 6 positions later, 16 years later, you know, I finally, because kind of thrown into the fire, you know what? Timing is everything. Because I needed the grooming. But the truth of the matter is, where's my hub to go to support me and say, okay, young sister, we're going to get behind you. So when all the other factors of politics come into play, you feel comfortable and not beaten down to do it. And protect it. That's a big deal.
Which is so I primarily have managed candidates of color, of variety, and really women. This is kind of my sweet spot. And it is different. It is different. I think when you're talking about running, what's not talked about a lot, this is my soapbox, is the staffing model. Because you'll have black women run and then hire an all-white staff, right? You'll have black women run, and then it's the same good old boys with the same methodology, with the same behaviors, with the same toxic behavior, and they don't understand black women, let alone when I ran a black woman in Arkansas in 2020, there were threats. We had to up her security. People were banging on her door over false Facebook ads. Like, it is not just, can you get in the seat? It's, are you mentally prepared for being a black person and a black woman running in the South? And that threatens a lot of the model and a lot of the infrastructure and all of the power structure. Because if we actually started taking seats where we belong, things would actually change. And that is terrifying for the change is tough. So I think the staffing model is also
change. Unapologetic change. Because when we're in the room, it's that doesn't make sense. You know, it's just an immediate
it's the eye
check.
contact going.
Yeah, it's the eye contact. We have a check just in our presence. So yes.
I'm so glad you mentioned staffers. I'd like to give an example. I knew exactly who my chief deputy was, and it's a black man. And there were people in my ear saying, you know, you need to choose, you know, a Hispanic woman or a white or a male of this kind. And I thought, no, I'm choosing who represents my brand and who's going to be the best person for the job for this office. And just the fact that I was like, what do you mean?
That's a whole fight in itself.
It was a whole fight. It was a whole fight in itself. But I thought to myself, it's so interesting how when you do get to the space, then people are trying to direct you on who needs to be in your circle. You can't make the best decision for yourself.
I mean, even congressionally, you think about how many actual black women staffers exist on the Senate level. It's like 5. There literally are 5 of them. It's not that many. Like, even so, you have this diverse class that came in, right? It was the most diverse class we've seen in the history of America.
Who did they
And who's running them? Because let's be honest, right? Because the staffers are the ones who provide a lot of advice, a lot of input to candidates. And if you're getting advice from the same community that is polarizing who you represent, then it does lean into what guidance are you actually getting? Because you have to make decisions based off my 5-minute conversation with you in the morning. And if you're getting the conversation from my pocketed community that doesn't represent your community, you can't make the best decision.
Speaking of that, what about the crossover? Because many of you, I don't know of any office where you don't have, where you could just vote and campaign towards black people. You have to campaign to a cross section.
Yes.
Talk about that challenge and what are you seeing are some of the key learnings that you've gotten from the campaign trail?
Well, I will tell you that I think it's important for me that not only do we elevate and amplify black women and black people in positions of leadership and high staffing positions, because they are black, but they're also qualified. And if they are qualified and black, we should not have to apologize.
And I'm not so
And
much
even
looking at
not
staff, I'm
qualified.
talking about the constituency.
crossover.
The constituency.
So there's
Yeah.
there's a book called, and it's going to be offensive. There's a book called White Trash: The Story of Class in America Over the Past 400 Years. It's a pretty thick book, but it really discusses how the Southern strategy kind of came in, right? And how, in order to actually implement the power structure that, let's say, Southern whites wanted, they had to convince poor whites that they should be against blacks.
Right,
essentially.
exactly.
And so I think for me, if you would actually to discuss the issues on a class basis, I think you would find there's a lot of overlapping concerns and dynamics between rural whites and blacks, period, right? And so I think that's a narrative that a lot of candidates have leaned into, of finding in their voting base, what is that commonality around infrastructure, around farming, around education, right? And I think what has happened is certain communities have been able to hold on to a message. It's quick, it's easy, and I can remember it, and I can villainize a whole other population with that. But if a candidate can get into, let's talk about a different narrative, about what you're actually struggling with and not just what went viral. That's where we're finding, especially at the local level, people having a lot of success, right?
Wage.
Money. Your kids want to go to school too.
Yeah.
Your kids aren't coming back to farm. What are you going to do with all this land that you now have acquired in your family for
Ladies,
years?
I know we could probably
Yes.
go 2 hours, 1 hour, but we're gonna wind this puppy down because I know Tracy told me
Okay.
he had a 45-minute to an hour slot. So with that, I'm gonna ask you, what 3 things or pieces of advice would you give to those who are listening to this program that they should do in between now and the Texas March primary? Mother?
I would say get to know the candidates that are running. It is important that you know who you are supporting. Get to make a voting plan. Make a voting plan so that you know either you are going to early vote, you're going to vote on election day, and then make sure every person you know also has a voting plan and goes to vote.
So I spoke about platforms earlier. So whatever your platform is, whoever you're connected to, your network, there has to be a one-on-one conversation. And the truth of the matter is, you can't get to know the candidates if the candidates are not coming to you. And so that platform, whatever it is, maybe it's another kitchen table talk, maybe it's a larger platform, it's a candidates forum. Candidates forums are so important so that when we do go to the ballot box, we actually have some sort of knowledge of what the person is running for and what office it is and how it's applicable to my livelihood. So, we have urban leagues, we have sororities and fraternities and all these different spaces that we activate in. And most of all, I keep going back to the church home because that's where we feel most comfortable, confident